All right. Good evening, everyone. It is November 20th, 2024, and this is a public meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, Settlement and Policy Subcommittee. I'm gonna pass it right over to Kip to get us started with the meeting.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for everybody coming out. I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a bit of a cold and losing my voice a little bit, but my name's Kip Silverman. My pronouns are he, him. I've been involved with PCEP a little over a year now. I'm sorry, PCCEP, a little bit over a year now. And I am co-chair of the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee. And let's do some PCCEP introductions. I see Tia on the upper left-hand corner there.
Hello, my name is Tia Palafox. I'm a PCEP member and co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you so much. Let's see, I'll scroll through. I see Carrie. See who I see.
Thanks, Tia. Hi, my name's Carrie Driver. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a member of PCCEP and a member of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. I will pass it to Kyle.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle Robinson. I'm a member of PCEP since, I believe, May of this year, and I'm a member of the Policy and Settlement Subcommittee. And I will let's invite Conrad to introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm Conrad Hewlin. I use he, him pronouns, and as of today, I'm officially a PCEP member. Good to join you all. Pass it along to Carrie.
Went already, but I see Ashley and Odelia. Ashley.
Hey, thanks, Carrie. Yeah, Ashley Schofield. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently the co-chair for the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, also known as PCEP. And thanks everyone for being here tonight. And yeah, Adelia, you want to help introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Odelia Zuckerman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a youth member of PCEP and the co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee.
And we also have Viva and Ronak with us. So you can introduce yourself just like Conrad did. But then we do have an update slide. So I'll ask you at that time to share just like a little bit about your background for the other members to hear. But go ahead and introduce yourselves now too. So go ahead, Ronak.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ronak Patel. I guess I'll just wait for the slide to keep going.
And go ahead, Viva.
Hi, good evening. I'm Viva Campo, and I'm another new member.
Great, and I think that's all the members here, Kip.
Yeah, that seems to be about right. So can we have city folks, PPB, and I guess Amiki folks that were able to make it also introduce themselves, please.
So I can start. I'm Dory Grabinski, PCEP Program Manager.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ames. I'm Deputy. I use she, her pronouns, and my cameras aren't working. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Mary Claire Buckley from the Portland Police Bureau, and my camera isn't working either. Sorry.
Who else is out there? I see Pastor Weisner. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Happily. Hello, everyone. I'm Pastor Robin Weisner, former chair, co-chair of the PCEP policy, community engagement and policy. But I just excited to be here because I'm nobody important, but just love being here with everyone. Do I leave it back to you, Kip? I gave Ashley an upside down smile.
Yeah, the monitor team, please introduce yourself, and community members, please introduce yourself in the chat if you would as well, please.
Thanks so much, Kip. I'll get started. I'm Mark Smith. I'm the lead monitor over the settlement agreement on policing. And as I mentioned just really quickly before, it's exciting to me to see familiar faces and to be getting to the point where there are many familiar faces. So I'm happy to see many of you again, and a couple of new faces I haven't met yet. On behalf of my team, I'm very excited to have the chance to meet you, have more of a discussion tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to some of my colleagues. I see Che.
Hey everyone, good evening. Chet Ramirez here, Associate Monitor with the Independent Monitoring Team. I have a background in homelessness and housing policy, community-based mental health, and working on response programs in Los Angeles. I've also worked with Portland in the past during the pandemic, recently in observing some of the RV safe parking programs. So excited to continue in the conversation, and good to see some of you again. Thank you. Okay, so pass it over to Russell.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Russell Bloom. I'm an associate monitor with the monitoring team. I live in the Bay Area, and where I've been involved in independent oversight of policing for at least 13 years. I primarily engage in misconduct allegation investigations in my day-to-day work in that field. Also, consistent policy review, recommendations for policy revisions, and community outreach and engagement. And that's probably my favorite part of the work. So I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight and continue to have opportunities to listen and learn from you all. Thanks for having me. Antoinette?
I'll just say hi again. Excited to be a part of the monitoring team, the community engagement associate, and today I painted the ceiling blue. So if I have blue hair, that's just an acknowledgement of when you get bored in a residential center, you'll do crazy things. So good to be here with you all.
Awesome. And Stephanie, I saw you pop in. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everybody. Stephanie Howard, she, her pronouns, and I am in the mayor's office. Good to see you all.
Okay, I think, did we miss anybody? No. Okay, cool. Let's go to community agreements, I think. I'll try to read this through without muting myself, but our community agreements for each of these meetings are to listen actively and respectfully, to share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, pardon me, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, call out bias, and be okay with ambiguity. And you can see our agenda for today. We're going to start with updates, and I believe Ashley is going to start off.
Yes, almost. I snuck one in there. So
Oh, no.
yeah, we just
Okay.
want to acknowledge that today we did appoint 4 new PCCEP members, which is always super exciting. And also 5 of you were reappointed. So it's also great news. But yeah, welcome to Conrad, Ronik, Viva, and Noel. And I think 3 of them, as you heard, are with us right now. So just very briefly, I think it would be great if we could hear a little bit about your backgrounds and what interests you in working on PCCEP, just so we can start to get to know each other, but we'll have plenty more opportunities to do that in the future. But yeah, anyone want to start?
Okay, yeah, sure, I can start. So my name's Ron Patel, like I said before. I am actually a 4th generation Portlander, 1st generation American. So I've seen this city since I was born. We've seen this city for years and years. I'm actually a part of the Make-A-Wish board for Oregon as well. So I actually helped out there today. And I'm in the hospitality industry for the state of Oregon and Washington. So, just I know a lot of other small business owners that operate hotels, convenience stores, gas stations. And we've just been troubled with, I guess, what's going on in the city and what's happening to like local businesses. We're seeing not the greatest people around and causing harm to our families, our guests, just generally having an unsafe public area. And I guess that's what really made me most interested about PCEP is how can we make the city of Portland, I guess, much nicer and safer for everyone that lives in it. It used to be really nice, even like 10 years ago, but there's been a big change, and I just want to be a part of getting the city of Portland back to having just like a safe community and a place that people actually want to come and visit.
Thanks, Ronick. Super great to have you here. Who's next?
Go ahead,
for it.
Viva.
You're fine.
Nope. My full name is Hyun Conrad Hewlin. I go by Conrad. Like I said, I use he, him pronouns. I'm originally from the Hillsdale neighborhood. My mom and dad met in Hawaii. I consider myself Hapa. My mom's family's all first generation. So I remember Portland as a 5-year-old. And when I moved back for job opportunities, where I'm at now, in the Goose Hollow neighborhood, and live in the Goose Hollow neighborhood, I was pretty shocked to see the city that I remembered was nothing like it was when I was 5. And so that motivated me. I currently am on one of the county community budget advisory committees. Previously, I've served on a nonprofit board and a foundation board. Big believer in you don't get to complain about things unless you're helping try to fix them. So I'm really excited to work with a fantastic group and not go backwards. I don't want to fall into the golden age fallacy, but to get things moving forward and that we can align services and standards to where Portland is going as opposed to what it currently is. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Conrad. And Viva.
Hi, I'm Viva Campo. I'm a licensed professional counselor in Oregon, and I have worked in community mental health exclusively with folks with severe and persistent mental illness, substance use, chronic housing instability, and I had a pretty, just by the nature of working with folks with those kinds of experiences, had a lot of involvement, justice involvement, a lot of involvement with police in general, and also parole and supervision, things like that. So I currently actually work in the forensic setting now. And so I just hope to use really my direct experience. I think challenges and concerns can get oversimplified sometimes, and there's a lot of complexity to both how things evolve to where we currently are at, and also just some of the solutions, how nuanced they are. And so I think working in systems and dedicating my career to folks with individuals that come and have a lot of police contact, I think hopefully that will serve in some way, just be able to really try to figure out some solutions and bring in the research side as well. That's my desire and hope. So yeah, that's a little about me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, welcome all of you. It's so great to have you, and just the ground that you all are covering, even in sharing your backgrounds, is just so, there's so much breadth there. And I think you all have a tremendous amount of experience, and it's really gonna every new member changes the group. Every new member adds so much experience and knowledge to what we do, and I can just tell that you all are going to bring a lot of great stuff, so I'm really excited to have you. All right. Oh, and it sounds like our fourth new member has also joined. Noelle, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well? Sorry to put you on the spot. I just saw that you were here.
No problem. I'm running around a little bit, just got home, so I'm just going to do a voice participation if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So my name is Noelle. I just recently joined the committee. Was really interested in joining as far as participating in community involvement, especially when it comes to the police enforcement, and some new changes are coming about. So was just really looking forward to joining this and exploring a little bit more about the policies and also hearing what everybody else has to share. But that's about all I have so far. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for sharing and for being here. Yeah, and excited to get to know you all more as we move forward too. We should have opportunities to do that coming up really soon. Okay, I think that's all here. And I did say to our 4 new members, because this is last minute for their schedules, if you're able to stay for the rest of the meeting, that's great. If you need to drop off, that's also totally fine. So just do what you need to do. Okay, I think we're ready for our next update. So let's move along to that one. And I do think Ashley has this one.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dory. And yeah, thanks. Welcome all the new members. Echo what Dory said, just really excited to learn from all of you. So thank you for your service and joining. Yeah, so as most of you know, or some of you know, PCCEP has worked on some language for codifying PCCEP within city code. We wrote a recommendation to the mayor earlier this year, and we had his strong support to move forward with a proposal for PCCEP codification. At the time, so we had a work group, PCCEP had a work group, we worked through the language, we worked the recommendation, we brought it to the community, we got it all approved. And then we've been kind of just waiting. So then we got the response back from the mayor. And we were excited and ready to move forward with getting it on a council agenda as a council agenda item for approval. But now that we're sort of post elections and sort of, can kind of understand the landscape a little bit more in front of us, I think PCCEP is gonna, there's a decision to hold off getting the votes in this year and waiting until next year for a couple reasons. One, there's no urgency for us to codify PCCEP right now. We are still under the settlement. We will carry on doing the things we do with the influence we have all next year. And then 2, we've talked about this in other spaces for other reasons about our relationship with the council and the new mayor, and just having to build that up and how important that is for a lot of the things we want to do, and really, create that arm for the council and the mayor for community engagement with police policy and programs, right? And so we're going to hold off trying to get it on council agenda this session. We're going to work on building that relationship with the mayor and the new council, get their buy-in, get their understanding of not just with the codification, but just like our work. I think continuing what we want to do. And we'll have our retreat and we'll think about the priorities and we'll listen to the public and we'll get the input from the new members, and we'll keep doing the good work. And we will do that, and we will prove to the new council, the mayor, how important it is and how successful PCCEP is in being that arm with the community engagement and policing. So we're throwing that out there. We wanted to just kind of keep everybody in the loop. PCCEP members, some of you also might be out of the loop just because you haven't been in the work group or a part of some of the conversation. So I'm definitely happy to answer any questions or talk a little bit more here. But really thinking of the new timeline being in spring, summer. So right, like working on meeting with the new council and the mayor and developing that relationship, and then definitely I think picking up the codification and getting that approval next year. I think that's definitely something we can still think about, but maybe just like we're not in a huge hurry. The settlement's in place. We've got an excellent code that we've gotten, we've passed it through public and through all the lawyers and attorneys. So we've got something ready to go. And yeah, I'm excited. I think this will be, I think our focus really should be on those relationship building, as we talked about in other meetings about other projects we're doing. But yeah, if any PCEP members currently have any questions, I'd love to chat about that. Or any thoughts? Yeah, Tia, I see your real hand. We're on mute.
Okay, there we go. When was the last time it was updated and who's on the committee working on it?
Oh, the work group?
Yeah.
Yeah, we approved it August. No, earlier than that, because I think we got the response from the mayor in August.
I could check the date of the recommendation, but after PCEP approved the recommendation, it has not been updated. Really what Ashley's sharing is more on the political development side and kind of the thinking based on developments post-election. And that's not so much a work group thing. That's more of kind of an assessment and temperature checking sort of thing, if that makes sense.
But on the work group, Tia was me and Kip and Carrie and Odelia. And I think those are
Leslie.
And Leslie, thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much for your work.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from PCEP members about that next move and just moving forward with pushing the vote to next year?
It seems like a great plan.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Carrie. I'm not sure if we're wanting to take I did want to also add because Dan, I see your hand up. I definitely want to get community input, but I'm wondering if just to keep the agenda going, because we have guests here, if you can put any questions and stuff in the chat for us to think about, but also stick around for public testimony because we can talk about it there too. I wanted to mention that. Yeah. I think that's it on my end. Thanks, Dory.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, and if any more questions come up, feel free to put them in the chat. We may have time at the end of the meeting. We definitely have open public comment at the end of the meeting. But yes, so moving along with the agenda, we have one more update here. Back to you, Kip, as we get that slide.
Yeah, thank you. Update on for the IMLLC, Independent Monitor LLC final report, not to be confused with the Independent Monitor folks that are here to present today on their draft proposal for doing the Independent Monitor work related to the settlement agreement. For folks that are not familiar, the IMLLC report was commissioned in after the summer 2020 protests to look at some of the concerns about use of force and I want to characterize this correctly, so my apologies. Use of force and crowd control techniques and munitions, and the fact that there were extended protests over the summer going into fall. So there are two series of reports, one initial report with a response from the city, and then the secondary report that I am not sure, maybe Stephanie can answer this, whether or not it's been published yet. But the final report is out or about to be published and will be presented to City Council tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. if you can attend. There still, the IMLLC identified some areas that I believe to characterize it well. They saw improvements across the board. They still had some concerns about certain areas, which I don't want to eat up this meeting's time going into, but we will potentially bring it to PCCEP in a future meeting. The one thing I do want to call out on it that I thought it was interesting reading the final report and the draft proposal from our independent monitor team here, that there's some parallels in the focus areas. So really looking forward to the presentation tonight from Mark and team, and to discuss this further down the road with the wrap up of the IMLLC final report. So stay tuned on that. And of course, if there are things you would like to see us talk about or have questions about it, please email us or reach out to us, and we'll include it in a future agenda. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate that. And with that, if there's no immediate questions, let's go to our featured guests tonight. So yeah, tonight we have Mark and his team are going to be presenting the independent monitor draft monitoring plan. And I don't know if we need to get into some of the methodologies as well, but if you feel it makes sense to address some of that, we'd love to hear it. But what we'd like to really understand is what are the next steps for the monitoring plan, and also timelines in review and approval to make it final. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mark Smith.
Great. Kip, thank you so much. Thank you to PCCEP for having my colleagues and I here tonight. I'll talk through a few things about both, yes, the monitoring plan that's still in draft and proposal phase, as well as our methodological plan that really accompanies that monitoring plan. To my teammates who are here with me tonight, I'll just say, as I always do, if I haven't had a chance to mention it to you, if you notice that I'm leaving things out or there are things you want to add into the discussion, please don't be hesitant in doing so. I very much welcome that. So I'll just remain mindful of that. And then one other, or maybe two other items before I get started. One is to a quick thank you to Kip. You did something that I think is worthwhile doing once more, clarifying something that can easily be confusing with regard to the names of different monitoring teams. This may be old news for some or a lot of people on the call, and if so, I apologize, but I recall having this thought when we came to a PCCEP meeting previously. There is a company called Independent Monitor LLC, or IMLLC, that has served a specific purpose in producing the reports that Kip just highlighted and will be presented to City Council for specific subject areas. Then there is the independent monitoring team, and that's my group, that was brought on to assess compliance with all the remaining paragraphs of the settlement agreement. And I promise you, it was not an intentional naming to have this be a confusing set of titles. It's kind of just by happenstance, and we happen to know their team, the other team, very well, and highly respect them. But I realized early on there was one meeting I was sitting in. I think there were at least some of the PCCEP folks there, and I realized that there needed to be some clarification. And so if there's any remaining question about that, including for the new members, welcome to Conrad, Viva, Renak, and Noel. Happy to talk about that more. I want to make sure everyone gets on the same page. So let me get started. Speaking of getting everyone on the same page, the first thing I want to focus on has to do with the process with regard to the monitoring plan and the methodologies. I want everyone to feel comfortable where we are at in terms of the requirements of the settlement agreement as they regard the monitoring plan and the methodologies. One of the specific duties for the monitor, our group, was to develop a monitoring plan, and to have comment on that from the parties, to make revisions to that monitoring plan based on those comments as appropriate, and then to file that final document with the court. We did create a first draft of the monitoring plan and received comments from the parties. Judge Simon requested that we also consider receiving comment from the public, which we wholeheartedly agreed with. We think that's a better process. And so the monitoring plan was recently published on the city's website, and we're currently accepting comments on it. Separately, the monitor has a responsibility before conducting any of the audits that we will be doing to assess compliance. We have not started any yet. But before we conducting those audits, we must develop a set of methodologies about exactly how we're going to go about that process and how we're going to measure compliance with the remaining paragraphs of the settlement agreement. And we must submit those methodologies to the parties, again, for their comment. We then consider those comments and make any revisions that we feel are appropriate based on them. And we thought, it makes even more sense to have public comment on those methodologies as well. We're very genuine when we've said since the start that we want to hear voices from all across Portland in helping to guide and shape what this monitorship is. And so the way the process has come down is that both the two documents that I mentioned before, one the monitoring plan, one the methodological plan, are now available together on the city's website, posted for public comment. And in addition to the comments we have already received from the parties and have already begun considering and trying to assess and debate internally and understand and discuss, in addition to all those comments, we're going to take all the comments from the public as well to help guide us in finalizing those documents, which we will ultimately file with the court. And those two documents together will really set the tone for how the semi-annual assessments of compliance with the settlement agreement will take place. So let me turn from the process a little bit to the content. They are pretty dense documents, as anyone who has accessed them, I think will see. And I have no intention, nor do I think it would let anyone survive, get out of here alive if I try to read through all of the material on them tonight. But with regard to the content, which is, again, still under development, still under consideration, because we want to wait and hear from the public before we finalize anything, the monitoring plan is basically intended to discuss what we will be assessing for compliance. It's an attempt to state as succinctly, clearly as possible what the requirements are under the settlement agreement to be assessed. And then the methodological plan starts filling in detail as to how each assessment will be made. What type of data is going to be looked at? Will certain things require a statistical sample of certain types of data? Will certain things require us to determine whether there is sustained and verifiable performance of certain requirements over a period of time? All of the how is beginning to be stated in the methodological plan. And so our general approach with both of these was to have them work hand in hand, have them work together, and that's why we figured it really made sense to release both documents. And I believe Chair Ramirez, the associate monitor from our team, has just put a link into the chat of where you can find both documents on the city's website. We wanted them to work hand in hand to really tell people the story of how we plan to conduct these assessments. And in addition, the other part of our approach I want to mention is that in both cases, with both of these documents, we really made efforts to tie in as closely as we possibly could to the explicit language of the settlement agreement. And that is not always perfectly easy. Language of the settlement agreement varies in its sort of phraseology and its syntax and how it goes about requiring certain things. And so it's really not sort of a cookie cutter approach, but we discussed and strived as much as we could to remain as honest as possible to the settlement agreement. We feel like that is the agreement between the parties. Well, that's where we are now. It's where we've been for over a decade. And it's not our job to come in and create new or different requirements. It's also not our job to sort of allow things to go unaddressed that are called for by the settlement agreement. The agreement is what was bargained. And that's what we're going to hold the standard to. And so we try to really tie our language to that in both documents. With that said, we do want public feedback as much as possible. They are dense documents, they're lengthy documents, but they're really going to set the direction and set the course for us, which is important. We want to have lots of points of view into that. I'll say here that I cannot, and frankly, I believe should not, make any guarantees or promises that we will or will not change certain things based on comments we receive, but I can absolutely promise that we will give genuine consideration to every comment that we receive, and that every comment will have a voice in trying to help guide us and make sure that we are doing our job, meaning our responsibility of hearing what the public has to say and making sure that the way we go about this monitorship, the things that we are mindful of, the things that we look for, are calling on the city and Portland Police Bureau to meet their requirements under the settlement agreement, and are doing so in a way that serves the broader community. And so that's the main message I had. I hope that there'll be a bit of a listening session here. We want to hear comments. People may not have read the documents just now. I fully understand that, and that's fine. And so we can talk about sort of general questions or process questions. If there are content questions, if there are specific things that you want to enter into the discussion, we're happy to hear them. Again, I don't know that I will have final answers for you tonight. In fact, I won't. The process for us listening is still ongoing, including to the parties themselves, and responding to their comments. So that process remains ongoing, but we absolutely want to listen. This is a time to start that. And as it was stated in the meeting materials, I'll just reiterate this again for the record and make sure it's as clear as possible. We will be receiving comments. They must be sent no later than December 8th, 2024, no later than December 8th. And the one method that we have chosen to receive those comments is formally by email at info@portlandpolicemonitor.com. And I'll make sure that either I or one of my team members might do it. I'll put that in the chat as well. I'll say it once more just for the record, info@portlandpolicemonitor.com. That's the email address where comments must be submitted by December 8th. So that's kind of the basic picture of where we're at in the process of the settlement agreement, what these two documents are, and why it's so critical for us to really hear from voices across Portland's community. Let me pause there, and I'll respectfully ask my team if they have anything to add, and if not, we can even get started into any questions or responses or more specifics that folks would like to get into. But first, for my team, anything?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Briefly, again, I'm Russell Bloom. I'm an associate monitor on the team, and really pleased to be able to be here in a big picture way, always learning from community and the people that we and PPB serve. I just wanted to point out that I've been trying to distribute via email as widely as possible links to the documents for review. And to the extent that you've received it and can think of people that may not have or that should have received it, please either ask me to send it out or just forward it yourself. If there are questions, please forward them to either the general email address or russell.bloom@portlandpolicemonitor.com. I am trying to work in these last couple weeks before December 8th to really make sure that we've done our best effort to widely distribute the link and give the most people possible an opportunity to review and weigh in and deliver their comments to us so that we can properly consider everything. So to the extent you're able to help with that, that would be greatly appreciated. And whatever that looks like, distributing or asking me to distribute, whatever works for you, we're happy to do that. So thanks for your assistance there.
Appreciate that. Leslie, you have your hand up. I'm not hearing you if you can hear us.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, yes. Yes, but I was going to let the rest of the independent monitor team speak before I
Okay.
And so if y'all want to keep going, I'm good. I just wanted to raise my hand up before I lost my train of thought.
And nothing additional on my end.
We're good.
Great. I just had a question and apologies. I'm Leslie Martinez, PCCEP member. I'm a little bit late. I had a work commitment. But my question was about the visibility into the comments and input provided and collected that will be sent to the independent monitoring team. Will there be visibility into those comments and input collected? And if so, what will that look like? Or if not, why?
Yeah, a great question. I think for comments received from the public, those I anticipate will be publicly shared. However, from the parties, the requirement is for them to provide comments to us, and so I wouldn't necessarily speak for them, and I haven't asked them, frankly, whether or not they'd want those to be shared. So I'll hold off on making that assumption. I think for the comments from the public, however, I think our intention is to share those.
Will that be an email or like in what way have you considered that?
Yeah, I think what I've seen before is that maybe a couple ways. I know the city, I think, does a really nice job in producing documents for public circulation and really helped us out by using the very familiar part, I think, their website where these documents can be found. We are also, and so we can list there the public comments that we receive. I think we might wait until we receive all of them together and post them at one time. We can put it back on that website to say that once the December 8th date has passed, share all the comments that we have received publicly on that same place. And then in addition, we are in the process now of developing our own website for the monitoring team, trying to get that up and going as quickly as possible. We're still probably a couple weeks away, but working on that as fast as we can. And so I think right around the time of that deadline, we'll be able to share all of our documentation there as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, cool. So, question, can you walk us through the overview of the plan and methodology that you plan on implementing? I'm reading the entire thing. It is dense. It's probably not the best choice, but yeah, if you could do a overview for us, I think it'd be really helpful to provide some framework of what you're monitoring, which relates to the articles of the settlement agreement that are still not resolved, and speaking maybe a little bit to the methodologies that you plan on taking as well would be really helpful, I think, for our meeting here.
Sure. Thanks much, Kip. So I'll try to be mindful in particular of people who may not have seen these documents yet, which again, I fully understand and is completely okay. The documents, as you'll see, they're in line with monitoring plans that exist in other cities that are under some form of settlement agreement or consent decree in the basic structure, although there are certainly things that are different about our plan as well. But the basic structure is to lay out a row for each and every paragraph of the settlement agreement that remains subject to assessment for compliance. And in this case, as again, many of the people on the call I recognize know this, it's a total of 56 separate paragraphs, 15 of which are subject to self-monitoring at this point by the city. And so for each row in both the monitoring plan and our methodologies. We state or restate sometimes the basic language of the settlement agreement. Sometimes the language of the agreement is quite lengthy and hard to always sort of recreate word for word in a chart. But we try to recreate or state the basic premises of each paragraph that is an existing requirement for the city to comply with. Or to continue its compliance with in many cases. We talk about, they are separated, Kip, as you mentioned, into the primary areas of the settlement agreement. Those include use of force, they include training, accountability, let's see, crisis intervention, and a few others as well, community-based mental health services. They're separated out into those categories as well. And for each line, each row in each of these charts, there's a discussion of what it is that is required of the city, what kind of information or data that the monitoring team, pardon me, is going to need to receive in order to conduct its assessment. And that data, I think, can be really wide ranging. It could be anything from really use of force data for a certain time period to access to city employees to conduct interviews or talk to them. So it can be pretty wide ranging. And then in addition, the anticipated timing of when we will receive that data, when we will turn around our assessments. And some of that is discussed in the introductory section of these documents as well. So the introductory sections do have a basic timeline. I can walk through that too in just a moment. But basically for each line, once again, the monitoring plan intends to say what it is that we are required to and will be assessing, and the methodological plan begins to talk about how. Let me say another word about that with regard to the how. As I mentioned earlier on, sometimes there are data intensive or quantitative assessments to be made that really clearly rely on a sampling of data. And oftentimes, though not always, those come within the use of force sections. For instance, in assessing whether or not the Portland Police Bureau has implemented and sustained a verifiable performance of certain principles in its use of force policy, we may select a sample of use of force cases and look at those to see how many times the policies were adhered to and how many times they maybe were not. And so a description for each line of what we're going to do is included in those methodologies. Sometimes things are much more qualitative in nature, and the requirements from the settlement agreement are really purely qualitative. And we tried to give a description there of exactly how we'll go about making a determination of whether or not compliance has been reached. The last thing that I'll mention is that in the methodological plan up at the top, in the introduction, there is a set of standards of what will constitute compliance. There are definitions for substantial compliance, partial compliance, and non-compliance, although initial steps have been taken. These standards, by the way, are generally consistent. And thank you for the screen share that's going on now. I know it's like I said, it's a big, dense document. These compliance standards are basically consistent with standards that have been used in the past with regard to this agreement, so that we don't move the goalposts, so to speak, or make changes on what the goal is here. But also, they rely on additional language that exists in the settlement agreement. I've said it a few times, I'm sure I'll say it more often. We pay very close attention to the verbiage of the settlement agreement, and where the agreement has some wording on substantial compliance, we wanted to insert that wording in the standards. So I've said kind of a lot, but Kip, to your question, each chart looks line by line, one row for each paragraph. The monitoring plan will tell from that paragraph what is it that we're assessing, and the methodological plan, which I believe is up on your screen now, tells what's the process we're going to use to make that assessment. And up at the top of that methodological plan are the standards that we'll be holding the city to in making those judgments. We do have the benefit, by the way, of the past assessments that have been made by the COCL and by the DOJ. The settlement agreement specifically states that in developing these documents, that the monitor will be guided by those past assessments. We took those into consideration as we developed these for sure. And so we have some familiarity with, these assessments as they've happened in the past, but it's our job now to make those assessments based on our best objective judgment with regard to compliance, and these documents try to say how we'll do so. I mentioned one last thing. I know I'm going on a little while here. I mentioned before a timeline. I'm going to see if I can pull up on my screen. This is maybe the one part that I'll read through. It's actually on the monitoring plan more than methodological plan, just to, again, try to get everyone on the same page, let everyone know where we're at. With regard to our compliance assessments, they're required to be conducted on a semi-annual basis. And so we'll be looking back at 6 months worth of data. I mentioned before one example from use of force, where as a quantitative measurement, we may select a sample of use of force events and make judgments about the compliance with requirements of that sample, which again, same thing that's been done for many years with regard to this agreement. The sample we'll be drawing from is from a 6-month period as we make our semi-annual assessments. And so for the first 6-month period of data that we'll be looking at, which is July 1, 2024 through December 31st, 2024, the data that we're required to have, we are saying that we'd like to have it and must have it by February 15th. It's approximately 45 days after the end of that 6-month period. Understandably, I would hope it takes the Bureau, takes the city time to compile data. They can't just hand it over on January 1st of the following year. They've got to be able to compile it and gather it for us as necessary. We fully understand that. And so the aim is to have that data to us by February 15th of 2025. We will then take that data, complete the assessments as they are described in the methodological plan, and provide them in a draft form 45 days after that. And so that's April 1st date. And I'm just kind of reading through this chart that's up on your screen now. The parties then, again, by rule of the settlement agreement, have the opportunity to provide confidential written comments back to us 15 days later, mid-April. We will consider those comments just as we are considering their comments on each of these documents. It's a very similar process. We'll consider those comments and make any appropriate revisions based on what they tell us by the end of April. We will post a draft of our report at that point to the public and receive community input for another month, and 32 days exactly, but roughly another month. We will consider that input just like we considered the comments from the parties from the first half of June, and then file the final report after giving all consideration to both the parties' comments and the public's comments by the end of June 30th, which also will initiate the close of the next 6-month period, and the process will start over again. So that was a lot. I'm glad someone had the foresight and wherewithal to share, at least even for a moment, these documents on the screen. Thank you for doing that. I think it helped out a little bit, but I also recognize I talked through a whole bunch of things there at once, and I'm sorry if that was less than clear. Let me pause there and see if there are questions based on what we've talked about so far.
No, I appreciate that. I know Delia had a question.
I have a more general question, so if anyone wants to ask something more specific about what was just shared, I can hold off.
No.
Or, oh yeah, Carrie.
I'm wondering how you're going to share the reports, what kind of format or engagement you're thinking of. I saw the section on PCCEP specifically, but are there other ways that you're going to do things maybe a little bit more digestible than the reports in the past?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's one of the earlier pieces of feedback that we received really within our first month of talking to a variety of audiences in Portland. And so I'm glad you mentioned it again. I'm happy to continue hearing that because I think it's important. And so we'll try to be extremely mindful of that. One way, but just one way, is, as I mentioned, once we get our website up and running, which is in the near term, so again, matter of weeks, I would say, we want to try to make sure that all of the documents that we have that are public are shared there on our website, and that people have an easy user interface to come there and see the documents, but also that the documents themselves, the reports, the semi-annual compliance reports, and the outcome assessments that we also will be doing, which are separate from the compliance reports, that all the things we produce are user-friendly, are accessible to all audiences, and so we will strive to do that. As far as how to publish them, it won't just be on our website. I want us to make sure we try to circulate them to the PCCEP, through the PCCEP, to your circles. We'll ask for your help in circulating them. We'll rely on what's already a growing list of community contacts that we have, and I might queue up some of my partners here in case they have anything to add on that growing list, to make sure we try to very broadly circulate these materials so that everyone has a chance to see them, to comment on them, and to easily digest them. And my colleagues, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just tag on to that, Mark, that in particular, Antoinette and Che and I are looking to make sure that we have the most information about the most people within the city of Portland who will ultimately be impacted by this work, and who are served by the Portland Police Bureau. So we want to make sure that our own internal database is continuing to grow, not getting stale, that we refresh it with good email addresses. But it's unquestionable that we will miss people if we don't have the support of folks that know others, that have been on the ground, that have been doing this work, that have conversations about why this is important. So we just really want to encourage you to bombard us with information about people with whom we should be connecting. Bombard us with contact information for people who should receive versions of the report. I think we can't overstate that the more names and organizations and contacts that we have, the better an opportunity we'll have for all of us to feel confident that the kind of input and the kind of feedback that's necessary for this process is really being received. And it's important that we hear things like what you said, Carrie, about the digestibility of our work product. And, if that's not elevated, we don't know it. And so everybody has their own perspective on the process and on the work, and we want to be very exhaustive in our efforts to try to collect that information. So just again, I think I'm asking for help and support in that area from all of you on this call, while we do everything we can to sort of amplify your expertise. So thanks so much for hearing that.
And with that, ditto, and thank you, Carrie. I think the word digestible, because just listening to that, and I much respect for Mark, it's lawyer ease with divine respect, but I have to like digest it. And I think with community engagement, to share that with communities in a way that they can understand it, to even give feedback. Because if I don't understand what you're saying, I'm just going to nod my head like you're doing, and like, how do I respond? And to that end, as Russell shared, he and Che and I have been really reaching out, and thank you in advance, Dory and Tia, for the extensive list that you have from PCCEP. I mean, it was grassroots, and we're really looking forward to getting that, because I think it was like dozens and dozens of folks, because we want to be sure that we don't miss anyone. And as we shared today in our meeting, Russell shared that I'd rather somebody get it 3 times than someone not getting and say, what about me? So from grassroots to everyone, and if you think of, with that list that you have, when I read that, I was most impressed. I don't know when you compile that, if it's been updated, and I had a brief conversation with Dory. There are lots and lots of folks, and I know, so we're looking forward to that, and Digestible will keep that in mind, because when we're talking and reaching out to communities, various communities, diverse cultural communities, it's important that the language is digestible. So thank you for that. And feel free, if you see the list and someone slept off, as Russell said, let us know. Please let us know.
Go ahead, Noel. Or sorry, if Russell had a.
I can absolutely wait till it comes back around. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Go ahead, Noel.
Okay, so I was going to ask how the data samples are selected for this.
So we have on our team, although not here tonight, a couple of folks who specialize in doing data assessments, in particular with regard to law enforcement agencies. And once they take an assessment of what the universe of potential data is, they will sort of use what they feel are appropriate, statistically significant rigors to make sure that they're selecting a sample that we need to make an accurate and objective assessment. So it may differ in certain instances, although for use of force cases, there are a number of things that we're required to look at, a number of paragraphs that deal with use of force, and we'll likely select just a single sample that will get us the information we need to look at all those paragraphs. As far as the actual methods and equations that will be used to make those sample selections, I'll be completely candid with you. It's something that I rely on my team for. It's not my specific area of expertise, but I feel very confident in the folks in our team that have done this I'd say countless times on a large scale for different agencies. And so they have a sense of knowing, hey, if I'm looking at a sample of force cases to determine compliance with policy, to determine behavior of officers in certain circumstances, to determine adherence to rules when interacting with those perceived to be suffering from mental illness in some form or another. Here's the sample that I'm going to need to look at, and here's the data that I'm going to need. We have had those conversations, and I'll sort of leave it to them. They're going to develop the evaluation instruments that we will use for each and every paragraph. And some of those are where we'll use such an instrument. It's listed in that methodological plan, in that very dense plan. We indicate that we will develop an instrument, but I'll leave the actual development of it to them, and trusting that they'll be reliant on appropriate audit principles and appropriate rigors in making sure that they put our team in a correct position to be able to make an objective assessment of whether or not there's compliance with a given paragraph. So I'm sorry I don't have the even more specifics on the data selection for you, but those are the principles of the standards that we'll be using.
Thank you for going through that. I will have to take a look at what information you have or proposing as well, just to get a little more detail of what that entails. But thank you for sharing.
Sure. And then, well, the one other thing that comes to mind is that although I don't have the sort of the equations that we'll use in front of me right now, and again, I apologize for not having that sort of level of detail or that expertise myself. These are not meant to be in any way sort of in a black box or shrouded in secrecy as we produce our public reports and maintain mindfulness into the digestible nature of them. Difficult task in trying to present a lot of information, but also make it easily accessible as much as possible. As we do so, I think you'll easily be able to see that level of detail, exactly how we select our sample. How many cases do we look at in total as far as the universe? Out of those, what was the percentage that we selected and why? And what were our findings based on that sample? So all of that will be for public review, public scrutiny, public comment. I just don't have the sort of the actual tests that we'll be using right in front of me now.
Great, thank you. Odelia's Zoom hand isn't working, but I believe she was next.
Yes, thanks, Tori. Yeah, so I have two things I wanted to say. First, I think like really appreciate your commitment to making this digestible and available to the community. I think that's like super, super important. And I think that that's always like a practice, right? And as someone who has like personally Gen Z attention span of like a 6-second TikTok video, that like it's important to engage people in different ways. And like I think I love like an Instagram infographic or just things like that that are like visually compelling as well and have like little blurbs of like, here's what our plan is. Do your comment now. Obviously, like I love to use Canva for work, so that's a way. But yeah, I think like I just wanted to give some feedback on that. And I think even like right now is a really important stage in like getting that community engagement and feedback. And I think that like for some folks, this does fit to their like learning style and the way they learn things through like hearing them and looking over like a long document. For others, it doesn't. And I think like even at this stage, we need to be engaging as many people as possible. And I think like I know the comment period ends on the 8th. But so that's like not or that's a short turnaround, but that's just something that I wanted to mention. And I think like thinking about it's great that you have a website and you're going to make that accessible, but I think how do you get people to the website, right? How do people know about it? There's all these other things and methods for engaging people. And especially like as a youth that like I think are important for people in my community, right? And I know like a lot of activism happens online too, and a lot of people who do have experiences go online to talk about them. Like that's just a huge space to engage folks. But yeah, I think like having maybe in times like these when you do come to PCCEP, like a presentation with slides where that we can also like share out to the community and that they can access those and understand that. So that's my first point. And then my second one was more of a question related to content of like the plan. I know like as PCCEP, we've been, and I've only been around since COCL, so like that's the process I'm familiar with and other PCCEP members are familiar with. And I was wondering if you could just share like maybe what's different or what we can expect to see differently about your process versus COCL, so we can just like think about those changes and how they're going to impact things.
Yeah, let me start off by saying I love the comments you made, Odelia. Thank you for those very much. Even as old as I am, and it's whatever, it's old. I've had a brief experience in a previous job using things like Canva to try to get some of our messaging out to the public in a much more quick way and agile way than this past organization had done in a long time. And it wasn't my idea or doing, by the way, but it was staff that I was working with. And you're right. When we're frankly even doing it, we were behind the times doing it. So I think you're correct to raise that. It's things that we will be mindful of as we produce our public reports. I think that's the right way to do it. I'm going to ask Russell in just a second, make one more comment that I know we had talked about before. There was just one other element that I wanted to enter into the discussion I don't necessarily feel badly about, but I think that is at play here. With regard to these two specific documents, this monitoring plan and the methodological plan, again, both of which are indeed quite dense. It's interesting that they were not necessarily designed under the settlement agreement for public comment, at least not initially. There was comment by the parties for sure, requirements for us to take those into consideration. I've mentioned that before, but it was a bit of a pivot to get further public comment on those. One we fully agree with and support, and I think is the right way to go. we didn't necessarily have quite the same footing or opportunity that I am certain we will have with the semi-annual reports that are designed for public comment through in-person town halls, public comment through posting on in public places on the web, other types of comment as well, which we are already planned for and excited about. We'll have a little bit more footing and opportunity to do that then, and what I said before, I feel badly. I feel badly that maybe we don't now or didn't now on this one, but it was a bit of a bit of a change from what was the requirement of the design and the settlement agreements. That played a factor. None of that takes away from everything that you said. Our folks are taking notes here, and I think we'll rely on people with more experience than the little bit that I told you I have in presenting things to the public differently than just, hey, here's a report online, go click a link to it. People who do it much better than I will be weighing in for us from our team and saying, hey, here's a really more effective way or multiple more effective avenues of how to get this information out. And they're very much in line with, I think, what you just said. And so I appreciate your comment very much. With regard to the COCL and differences, it's a little challenging at this point to state some of the sort of in detail differences that'll happen with regard to our reports or certainly our findings. We have yet to receive our first tranche of data from the 6-month period that I mentioned that we'll be reviewing. It hasn't concluded yet. And so it's a little hard to say with a lot of specificity exactly what's going to be different, but we do have their, I've looked through, I believe, every one of their past reports over the years, some of them multiple times. And there are differences I think that you'll find in some of the things listed in these two charts, in particular the methodological chart. Sometimes the COCL might have written in its quarterly report that they looked at X number of use of force cases. I keep coming back to that example. Our sample might be different because, to someone's earlier question, we might select our sample a little bit differently. It might be a larger sample. It might be a sample that's stratified in a different way, where the cases that we look at are not just a group of 20, but they are a number of cases spread across different precincts or spread across different types of units in the police bureau or whatever it might be. All that stuff will be laid out. And some of them might have some differences to what the COCL did. Others, and many, will be very similar. If we think that the COCL's methodology and how they were going about things was appropriate, then we wouldn't change it. So it's hard to say with great specificity, but I think you'll start to see those differences as we produce that first report and after we had a chance to look at the data and see, I think here's what we really need to focus on. And maybe that's similar to what the COCL did, maybe not. We'll try to make sure that as we present the information, I know we're going to keep hitting on this because it's so important, as we present the information, that maybe we do it in a way that expands on the avenues and the different types of presentations that were done before, because we want everyone to feel comfortable accepting these results. Dory, if it's okay, I wanted to ask if I could ask Russell for one more comment. I know we had talked about one more aspect of this important communication aspect.
Thanks, Mark. And I think there's an opportunity here to sort of illustrate the value of this kind of community involved approach with regard to the work that we're doing in real time. And so, Carrie's suggestion about digestibility of these reports, as we were all looking at them and sort of absorbing that it may be complex for many to really plug into and connect with the way that it's being presented or the language that's used, it just seemed quite obvious that for it to be digestible, a word to which we keep returning, a summary would be helpful. And there's absolutely no reason that we can't commit to doing that going forward, providing not just the document that requires the community input and feedback to be integrated into our approach, but providing access to the information that's contained with the document and essentially a roadmap. And I think that makes it more fluid. It makes people able to and more willing to want to engage in that way. And then that in turn helps us incorporate the feedback that we get. And so just in this moment, we can commit to working toward a future where there are summaries. And I also, of course, absolutely appreciate the conversation about more digestible means of distributing information and displaying and illustrating our work. I am even older than Mark. And so I don't know even some of the words that you're using, but I do have kids. All my point is that we can also look at ways that we can incorporate those other ideas about presentation styles and distribution media as have been suggested here tonight. And I think these are wonderful ideas, and it is very important for us to make sure that we're able to listen and hear when we have opportunities to get that kind of feedback so that we can make our adjustments in this process to make it more effective and better, essentially, for you all. So thank you for that input. I think it has already been very valuable within the last 30 minutes. So much appreciated, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening and acknowledging it. One thing I want to make sure doesn't get missed is what I'm hearing, and also digesting what's going on in the chat as well, is I think there's also a real desire for, when we talk about this in public meetings, for it to be accessible in this space. And something, and we have talked, I think, with this team, kind of when you were coming on board back in the summer. I think there is still a desire to have some sort of format similar to the Cocal town halls, however that takes shape. And yeah, however that takes shape, some sort of town hall format. I feel like we're kind of like practicing it right now, and maybe, you know, trial by fire sort of thing. But yeah, definitely like visual aids, like you know, things broken down, simple language, all of that stuff is just so helpful, because this group always has had a desire to engage with some of that more technical information. But for some of our members and some members of the public, this is the time, like these 2 hours is the amount of time that they have to dedicate to learning about it. And so I want to make sure that we're making use of the platform that we have, and the time that people are giving when we convene in this space, to kind of maximize understanding. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. I think it's really great talking about the reports, and extremely important, but also in terms of the presentations and sharing out in this way.
Dory, I just want to say I appreciate that. Another thing for us to remain mindful of, and that, yes, we did talk about right at the beginning, one of the first, I think, introductions meetings we had, I recall it still. And as I mentioned before, the settlement agreement has a minimum sort of requirement, and that's how we view it, for similar town halls. Maybe they're not exactly the same necessarily, but similar concept as far as sharing information publicly from the monitoring team. We imagine that I think more can be done, and can be done differently. But we know that, and we'll have sort of our, again, footing under us. We know that's going to happen with regard to our compliance assessments that we'll be making. This was a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of a change with these two documents. I'd rather have them here, even in their dense format, as opposed to not at all, even if they're not presented the way that I think they future reports can be and will be. And so I'll commit to that. But I'm glad you again raised it. You're right to raise it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Ashley, you've been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, but Corey, I think you said everything I wanted to say. So thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the input. And, you know, I think, you know, I feel like a Mark was sort of missed tonight. We could have had a little bit more of that practice of information sharing here. And so, yeah, please see PCCEP and this forum as a place to really break down that information so that it is digestible, and to practice that. And really, yeah, everything that Dory said, it just really look forward to seeing more of that. So thank you.
And I also want to own some of that too. Part of it is absolutely on me, and making sure we're communicating clear expectations, and we are still so early, and we're working towards, you know, figuring out this new process together. And I think I'm just happy that the team is so receptive and I think very genuine in the desire to get to that place. So no doubts on my end. And yeah, Dan, go ahead.
Hello, good evening. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the group Portland Cop Watch. We did have the benefit of meeting with some of the members of the monitoring team. I want to thank you again for having that meeting with us. So I got a number of comments. I'm going to try to do them quickly, and I'm hoping you can address some of them. So first of all, just in terms of the timeline, you already laid out that you know that you're going to get the first report out on May 1st. So I think I would now start setting up town halls for that month. And the earlier the better, because if people want to make informed comments, they have to get the information first before they make the comments. So kind of front load the public presentation of the information so that people have time to make reasonable comments. And kind of related to that, this report came out, and I got a copy of it early because I'm a member of the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. But the email that we got at Cop Watch from you wasn't for 3 days after that, which means technically we would have had 27 days instead of 30 to comment on it if I hadn't already gotten the information. So try to think as much as you can when you know something's coming up to get the information out as soon as possible instead of even a couple of days can make a big difference. So the big, well, I'm going to leave the big question for last. So the Training Advisory Council is still part of the agreement. I went to their meeting the other day, and I don't know if any of you were there because they have a terrible setup for their interactive, their virtual part of their in-person meetings, where their camera just points at people in the audience who aren't necessarily even talking the whole time. But I think it was an important meeting for you to watch if they have, if you can get a hold of the recording of it. They've been talking for like 2 years. The committee, the Training Advisory Council, sorry, has been asking for the presentations about use of force to have more data in it that's meaningful to them. And the Bureau members keep saying, we were told by the compliance officer and the DOJ we can't change a word of how we're putting things together. But that is not true. The compliance officer put in a report. That's not true. We can add things to the report. We don't want you to take things out, but you can add things to it. And the Bureau keeps saying they can't change it. So I think that that particular issue is right up your alley in terms of making sure that the TAC gets what they need. So in terms of your website, I'm hoping that you have a nice short URL, unlike the thing that the city uses to post these things on. I don't know why they can't post them on portlandoregon.gov/monitor. Like that'd be great to have just an easy URL to look at instead of going to that really weird, long, cumbersome thing. And so, this is a perpetual problem with the city too. I'm not having a good or easy website to navigate. All right, so finally, the big issue is that I didn't see any mention, and maybe I haven't read this yet, I kind of skimmed through it, of the outcomes that you're supposed to be doing as part of your assessments. And the most important one that we've been hammering out for a long time, and we testified this morning about a $400,000 settlement for a man in a wheelchair who was harmed by the police during a 2020 protest, is are they learning anything from all the lawsuits that they're settling? Or are they just paying it out as a matter of doing business and moving on with their lives? Last month, a couple in Happy Valley got $500,000 because a police officer took a canine police dog home and it got out of his yard and attacked these two people. But the chief made a point of coming to the city council and telling them, here's what we learned from that and here's why it's never going to happen again. That is incredibly rare, and we've been asking that for years and years and years. We talked about the paragraph is 222E subsection 8. We talked about it with you. We talked about the old, when it had a different number, with the compliance officer, and they never put anything at all about settlements in their reports until about a year ago, which was 11 years into the settlement agreement. So I'm really hoping that you're going to talk at some point in this plan about your outcomes and how you're going to assess whether or not the Bureau is learning anything when they get sued. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Dan, for all of that. I can try to respond to a few of those for sure. We're mindful, yes, our website, I think we've talked a lot about digestibility, access. We'll continue talking about that because it's an important topic, and making sure people can get there easily is something that we do have in our minds. Thank you for that comment. With regard to the Training Advisory Council, we have met with them on a couple of occasions. have talked to them directly, and I have another meeting scheduled with them now. And so we are discussing or listening to concerns that they want us to be aware of, and we'll continue doing so throughout the time that we're the monitor. And so we're familiar with the concerns that you raised directly from members of the TAC Council, and we'll continue hearing them out should they want to reach us to express those concerns. And then with regard to outcome assessments, as I was kind of muddling my way through some of the different parts of these lengthy documents before and kind of, I don't know, winding my way through them as best as I could, I mentioned very briefly the outcome measurements that we'll be doing as well. And you're absolutely right to point those out. Another responsibility for the monitor is to produce, separate from the compliance assessments, outcome measurements. And we find those to be critical for a lot of the same sort of thinking that you said. Are these reforms working? Are they getting done what needs to be done for the people of Portland? And the settlement agreement does go into a lot greater specificity and detail when it comes to how outcome measurements will be made, or at least a baseline for those outcome measurements, more so than the compliance assessments. And for our team, what our plan is, and this is mentioned very briefly in the monitoring plan up near the top, what our intention is to produce those outcome measurements in sort of concert with how they're described in the settlement agreement on the same timeline as our compliance assessments. So semi-annually, we will produce both judgments of which paragraphs are in substantial compliance and any that may not be, as well as what the outcome measurements are as required by the settlement agreement. Those will all be produced on the same timeline. So I appreciate you pointing those out. They're critical. We take those seriously as well. One other aspect to those that I'll just mention since you raised them. Anyone who wasn't aware before, you can sort of tell the process is very similar for different parts of the settlement agreement. Before we conduct those outcome measurements, we will submit our methods to the parties, receive their confidential feedback again, and take into consideration their comments before actually conducting those outcome assessments. So very similar to what's happened so far with the few different parts of the settlement agreement. But you're absolutely right to raise them, and you should anticipate that those will come out every 6 months along with our compliance assessments.
Great. I think we have Pastor Weisner now.
I just say thank you again, Dorian, Mark, and team. Pretty much as I've been in the wait for it, and coming behind Dan is always hard because he's already addressed some of the thoughts. But I also see where Sarah has posted in the chat one of the thoughts that I was coming into as areas for timely. Mark, I would also say to the team, just like Dan said, thank you for meeting with many of the groups that you have met with prior, and to the point of conversation that was based around sampling. I'm looking forward to seeing the first report because, again, I say to the PCCEP and the new members, the thorough process that brought this team on to where they are here, as long as we've been dealing with this independent monitoring, I am very comfortable with how this team is assembled, even the ones that are absent at this point that's not here, that would bring information about how the sampling would occur. But as many times that we have met with him, Albino Minister Alliance, Dasamiki, myself, the elders, and again, even hearing with others, with the communities who have been engaged with you, Mark, very comfortable with looking forward to the report and recognizing that even though you don't have the expertise, there's a team that we are comfortable with, even with the facing of who you are. So thank you again. And to PCCEP, thank you again for what you do, because again, the ideal of being able to be here, that word digestible, Russell, I'm like you, pretty learning new terminology. All of a sudden, that's part by now terminology. I'll be using it a little bit more in the, like Odelia said, the TikTok area with the young people. I'm be a little hip. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Pastor Wisner, your words mean a lot. Thank you for that. And I'll reiterate just one thing I said about that sampling. I do feel badly I don't have sort of specifics on it here. I don't think it's the most complex type of sampling that's done in this arena. It's actually not extremely difficult or involved as you might find in an academic research paper. So it's not the most difficult thing, even though it's not my expertise, but it will absolutely not be sort of hidden, mysterious. It's much the opposite. Not only are we happy to, we want to make it clear exactly how we did things. And so we absolutely will do that in our reports. And so Pastor Weiser, I thank you for just sort of raising that again and the importance of it, that we get it right. We did actually want to do a couple of TikToks for these two reports. They went terribly, so we abandoned that. That's only a joke. We didn't actually try that. It would have gone horribly. But we'll be mindful of all these suggestions in the future from everyone. Thank you.
I
You're so
honestly
welcome, and thank you.
I don't know what to say to that. Just that's really sad to hear that that won't be happening. Any other comments or questions for the monitor team? Covered a lot of ground for sure, which is great.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific other than I really appreciate how receptive you all are to all the different inputs that you're getting. And it is essential to be able to get deep into the details of everything and also have it understandable, which are two very hard things, right? So look forward to seeing the website that gets developed and what kind of reporting tools are going to be used. And of course, we've talked about your team will hopefully be attending most of the PCCEP meetings and want to use our meetings here as a conduit for communication, as well as the ones that Russell and team are setting up too.
Absolutely. I'll just say thank you again. And Kip, I'm glad you said that as well. Yes, our team has been attending Faithfully PCCEP meetings. We'll continue doing so. And so this is not like the last chance or only chance to voice what you want us to hear about what the reports look like, about what your concerns with regard to PCCEP are, about questions about the settlement agreement, about anything else. Again, we will stay in our lane as far as what our responsibility is in terms of monitoring the agreement. That's what we're brought here to do. But as far as your ability to reach us and express questions, concerns, or talk about that monitorship, that will always be there as long as we are in place as the monitor, including at all the PCCEP meetings and subcommittee meetings. That's a commitment from us as well. So Kip, thank you for mentioning that, and thanks to my team for being here.
Yeah, appreciate that. Odelia, your hand is virtually raised again.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Kip said and thank you again. And I think also what Dan was saying of like, when your report's gonna come out, so we can begin to like plan for that. And I think maybe down the line in like April, or when you know what your report is gonna look like and what your presentations are gonna look like, maybe we could chat before the town hall or whatever that may be to kind of review that together. And I think that could be like a great way to work on that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. All right. If there's not any more discussion or questions for the monitor team, not seeing anything, I think it might be a good time to thank the team once again and move into open public comment. Does that sound good? Okay, all right, yes, well, thank you again so much, Mark, Russell, Antoinette, and Che, who I think hopped off, for being here tonight. We really appreciate, yeah, again, your openness and all the information that you have shared. And yeah, we really still are just in the very early stages of developing our working relationship, and I know this is going to evolve and progress, and that's exciting. So, and thank you all, or thank you to those of you who will be joining the orientation this Saturday as well on short notice. That'll be great as well. Great. Okay. So now I think we can open it up to open public comment. I know we had a few people who had some comments that came up already. So at this time, feel free to raise your hand and we will hear from you. And Carrie.
I just wanted to revisit the first agenda item, the last IM LLC report. I noticed that in number 6, they talked about the importance of public transparency and the fact that only communications through the media have been, authorized so far. So I think that's a good opportunity for us to go back and maybe engage in a platform with them on that.
I like it. That's a great point, Carrie. Thank you for pointing that out. Dan?
Hi, okay, well, I'm going to start there. I'm going to move around. This is Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch again. So the IM LLC report, the reason I didn't read the documents you're discussing today is because I was reading that report, which is 45 pages long, and we'll be testifying tomorrow afternoon about it. And one thing that we're going to mention is how the chief was at your meeting on Wednesday, June 12, and on Thursday, June 13, he held a news conference to announce the new team after you asked, how are you going to introduce the new team to the public? And they didn't tell you about it. I just think, this is irresponsible and completely against the quote unquote community engaged policing that's in your name. So I don't know why they didn't think to invite you, but it's really, they're doing a very poor job. The rapid response team, luckily for us in Portland, there weren't any major protests or major police crackdowns on those protests between the election and now. The new policy for the crowd control was approved on October 15, which means it wasn't even in effect until November 15. So there would have been 10 days where they would have been using their old policies to the extent that the new policy made any improvements. It's just a strange way that the police do their business here. I wanted to follow up on what I wrote in the chat earlier. This morning, I was at City Council to welcome the new members and to talk about how important the PCCEP's work is to this community. And just so you know, my Zoom app just crashed. Now I was about to post something in the chat. I'll log back in a second and paste it in. But I'm going to read to you now instead what Mayor Wheeler said exactly. He said, with regard to codification of the PCCEP, I want you to know we're still working with Dory and the committee on that. It is my hope and expectation we'll bring that to the council prior to the end of the year, so that it's still very much front and center for all of us. So, and I also want to point out that it may seem like it was a big hurdle to get over a couple of months ago when there were a lot of people posturing because they were running for mayor. But like for instance, the Joint Office of Homeless Services was almost completely decimated, and then the city council, when they realized that there was a different mayor and city council than they were expecting, perhaps back down on that. So you may have a good chance of getting it done before the end of the year, especially as I wrote in the chat, if Donald Trump comes in and decides that the DOJ shouldn't be looking at police departments anymore to see if they're if they need scrutiny, because he wants to let them run free in the streets and do whatever they can, and then there'll be no crime, according to him. Which is a ridiculous premise and unconstitutional. And finally, I think I asked this question once before, but I'm noticing there are 11 members of the PCCEP there tonight, and this is a subcommittee meeting. And there's 13 total members. So is there a definition of the subcommittees, or are there specific rosters of who's on the subcommittees. Are some people here tonight as, you know, just as PCCEP members who are joining the subcommittee? It's very confusing to the public. There used to be a list at the top of the agendas that said, these are the members of this committee. And then you would know who's the members. So it helped me to understand, because technically you can make a decision on behalf of the whole PCCEP, and those two people would just be out of luck because they weren't here, even though there's a majority of you here. I mean, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll quickly respond to the last part, Dan. With all the changes that have happened in the committee over the last few months, and thankfully we have new folks that just joined. It's one of the conversations that I have with Dorian team going forward about having more defined subcommittee rosters and structure to it. It's just how my brain works. So I'm not sure it was done before I joined, but I'm with you on the idea that it would be nice to have a little more formality to who's on what committee. However, I don't think we do any kind of cross-team voting in the subcommittee meetings for the most part, unless it's specific to that subcommittee. So.
Yeah, I think it's great that our members have a culture of attending most of the meetings, regardless of whether they're members of the subcommittee or not. We would never want to dampen attendance or gatekeep who can attend the PCCEP meetings. They're all PCCEP members. So I think it's great. Pastor Wisner?
Yes, I would like to make 2 points. The first point is I think Mary is still here, but definitely Stephanie to the Bureau. When I saw the report about the handicapped man that was treated the way he was inhuman, I was sickened. It reminded me from what I saw and the snapshot that I saw of Bloody Sunday. And everyone know what that represents. I'm hoping, because the information just crossed my table when I saw the report, that the things that we have come this far is that the responsibility from the supervisors to everyone that's involved, that when something there is moved that fast, it doesn't take this long for something to happen, even though that we hear the report that he was no longer with the Bureau. My hope is that he's no longer with any Bureau. My hope. That's my comment. To the second part, I want to say to PCCEP, this is what I actually envision, what a great meeting of what PCCEP is about and is forming, and having what has been proposed tonight, a place for education, understanding, reporting, and to be able to continue having community dialogue and outreach. It is in its best form right now, in what I think and how I participated tonight and enjoyed myself here in this meeting. So those are my 2 comments.
Thanks, Pastor Wisner. Always great to have you.
Yeah, I also wanted to say thank you, Pastor Wisner and Dan, for bringing that up. I think that it's always important to center those who are impacted by policing and what we do here, and talk about it with the community. And so appreciate you bringing that up. And Yeah, that's all.
Maybe I think people are referring to something that was council item earlier today. If I'm not mistaken, maybe somebody could link that in the chat for those who missed it. Any other comments or questions while we have time? Or responses to anything that's been said? Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, to Dan's point, about like, you know, clarity in who's involved in subcommittees and isn't. I also kind of echo what other folks have said, that I think it's great that we all want to attend each other's subcommittees and be informed about what's happening, and reiterate that unless it's a full PCCEP meeting, our culture is not to vote in these types of meetings. So I want to reassure Dan of that. But to speak to his point, maybe it's a practice that we can implement, that as part of our name, we not only put PCCEP, but kind of like HIP has already put, you know, what subcommittee we're involved in, and then also have it added to agendas, perhaps, to just address that concern.
Great. Any other comments, questions? We still have a little bit of time here. All right, not seeing anything. Just gonna give it a few more seconds. Okay, Kip, I think I'll pass it back to you to close us out here.
Okay. Thank you everyone for attending. Mark, team, community, really appreciate everyone's input and conversation. I will second or third, I think the independent monitor team should do TikToks. So I am not sure if what our next meeting is scheduled. Dory, oh, we do have a full committee on the 4th. Okay, never
Yeah,
mind then.
small caveat here. December it's just so tricky. I'm gonna say this is not 100% locked in, because we are also working with you members to get a retreat on the books on a Wednesday evening. So this is, I think, when we'll have our full committee meeting in December, but bear with us if it does. It's just such a tricky month to schedule. So yeah, we will message out about that, share that publicly. I mean, yeah, we'll get that scheduled as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, great. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, at some point in the near future, I think it would make sense to have a conversation about the IMLLC report, and also talk about some of the changes that have recently put into play, and the unexpected outcomes on the good side of this election season so far. I think there's a lot of conversation to be had there. So stay tuned, please.
All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. I think that's all we've got. So sorry, just taking in some more stuff in the chat. But yeah, really appreciate everyone's contributions this evening. And the time is 7:51 and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
Recording
Great to see you.
stopped.
Thank you all. Good night.